So, today we'll be doing demographic structure of Indian society. Let's focus on the term demography first. Demography. Alright. Now, this term is actually a Greek term and has been derived from two words that means these are the two words. First is demos and the other word is graphen. Demos means people and graphen means to describe. So ultimately, demography becomes description of people. Now, demography basically is a systematic study of population. Okay, what does it study? It studies the births, the migration, the sex composition, etc. Now, it has been classified into two types broadly. Number one would be formal, and the other one would be social. Okay, so formal demography is concerned with the quantitative measurement. Quantitative measurement and analysis of the population change. It has highly developed mathematical methodology and which is suitable for forecasting the population growth and changes in composition. So we can understand here that it is more or less dealing with quantitative aspects of the population. When we talk about this social demography, it deals with the social, economical, and political aspects of population. Fine, so it studies the consequences of population structures and changes. Social processes and structures regulate the demographic processes. So these social processes are the ones which will be regulating our demographic processes. Now let's understand. Yeah. So the two processes that took place in the later half of the 18th century. These were very important events, and it's essential for us to understand these two events because they have direct link with demography. So, the first event that took place was the formation of modern nation state as the nation states as the principal form of political organization. And the second change that took place was the beginning of modern science of statistics. Now, why am I saying so? Firstly, modern nation state began to be interested in development of early forms of public health management, policing, maintenance of law and order, economic policies such as agriculture and industry, and taxation, revenue generation, and governance of cities. So all of these activities required some sort of data, and this modern science of statistics helped in acquiring data for all these activities. The first modern census that took place was in America, and the first modern census was of American Census 1790. Right? Now we also understand that demography has contributed an important role towards the discipline of sociology. But why is it so? Because these social statistics, when we're talking about social statistics, they provide a proper justification for any sort of social phenomena occurring in the society. So this provides a justification for sociology as well because aggregate statistics, which is collectively consisting of millions of people, they offer concrete argument for existence of a social phenomenon. If we have to consider an example, we will consider the example of death rate and the kind study on it. So Durkheim actually conducted a study on suicide, and as per him, rate of suicide, which is number of suicides per 1 lakh population, had to be explained by social causes. Despite each one of the suicides may have their own specific reasons, however, it had to be explained by some sort of social phenomenon. Therefore, we can see that this sort of social statistics was necessary to prove a social phenomenon. And thus, it provides a justification for the discipline of sociology. Now, before independence, India had also conducted 10 earlier decennial census, and so far, seven decennial census have been conducted, and the latest one was of 2011, which is more or less mentioned in our NCRT textbooks. We have been conducting census from 19 since 1951, and till 2011 we have almost about seven decennial census. Okay, so the demographic data collected now is essential for the planning and implementation of state policies for the economic development and the public welfare. Okay, now let's talk about some of the theories of demography. First theory of demography is of given by Robert Malthus. Thomas Robert Malthus. Okay, so this person stated that our population in the society rises in geometric progression. What is geometric progression? 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64. Oh, this is geometric progression. The population rises as per geometric progression. However, the agricultural production in the society rises as per arithmetic progression. Now, what do we understand by arithmetic progression? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So, do you notice the difference? Now, this indicates that there is an imbalance in the population and the food that is being produced. So, as per Thomas Robert Malthus, human population tends to grow at a rate that is much faster at which human means of human subsistence can actually grow. Therefore, as per him, prosperity in the society could only be achieved when you do what? You control the growth of population. And how will you do that? So he mentioned two ways to do that. The first method was positive checks or natural methods, natural control methods. And the second method was preventive check or artificial control. So positive or natural control methods were the natural disasters like famines or droughts or diseases or earthquakes, etc. And preventive or artificial control methods were like postponing the marriages or practicing sexual abstinence or celibacy. Okay. Now he was also criticized by people. And what were the criticisms that were offered? Firstly, that food production and standards of living, food and standard of living rose despite rapid population growth as well. If we have to think of a situation where this happened was in Western Europe, right? This has happened in the European countries. So, where the population was also rising and simultaneously the food production was also rising. So, we did not really notice an absence of, uh, we did not notice any imbalance in the society. The second criticism that was offered against his theory was that poverty and starvation that he is mentioning is not really caused due to growth or rise in the population, but it is caused due to unequal distribution of resources. So if you can take a guess, no points for guessing though. This is obviously the idea that Marxists and liberals followed, right? Poverty and starvation were caused by unequal distribution of resources. The next theory that we have to discuss is about demographic transition. Okay. Now, population growth is linked to overall levels of economic development. So, as per this theory, Our population growth is linked with overall economic development. So it highlights three stages of population growth from an underdeveloped and technologically backward stage to a developed technologically advanced stage. Let's understand those phases. The first phase is underdeveloped, quite underdeveloped, and it is technologically backward. What will happen here? Here you will have birth rate that is high, then you will have death rate that is also very high. Okay, so ultimately the growth rate becomes what? Less low growth rate. Okay, the second phase is transition movement that takes place from this is the transition period, which will transition from this underdeveloped technologically backward phase to a advanced phase. So what will the criteria be here? That the birth rate is going to be high and the death rate is going to be low. So what does this mean? This means that there is a increase in the growth rate population. The birth rate is high as it was in the first case. However, the death rate is low, unlike the first phase. Okay. So therefore, our growth rate becomes high. And the last stage is advanced technologically. The one that is technologically advanced. What does this mean? So this means that we have low birth rate and we have low death rate. So ultimately, this will also result in low growth rate. Fine? Okay. So we have to understand here that in this second phase, something happens. What happens is population explosion occurs in transitional stage because with death rate being low, let me just yeah, with the death rate being low in the transitional stage, and this death rate can be low due to disease control, better health and nutrition facility, and changed reproductive behavior. However, with the birth rate being more, this leads to what? This leads to population explosion. Now we will be studying about some sort of common concepts. Okay, so let's talk about total fertility rate. This is not there in the NCRT, however, it was there previously. So we'll just discuss it. Total fertility rate. So total fertility rate is the total number of live births. Total number of live births a hypothetical woman would have given if she lived in the particular reproductive age group and had average number of babies in each segment of this age group. Okay, and this is determined by, of course, the age-specific fertility rates for that particular area. So the total number of live births a hypothetical woman can give if she lived in the particular reproductive age of that particular area. This was total fertility rate. Now let's focus upon the birth rate. Birth rate basically means number of live births per 1,000% of population in a given area during a given period of time. So it is number of live births per 1,000 people. Same goes with death rate. Number of live deaths per thousand people. Again, same thing. Then you have growth rate. Growth rate is also known as rate of natural increase. If you're talking about growth rate means the difference between the birth rate and the death rate. Means DR minus DR is equal to growth rate, GR. Okay. When this difference is going to be zero, if it's zero, or in practice it's very small, then we say that the population has been is stabilized. What do we mean by this? Population has been stabilized or has reached continuing, continuing with this. Birth rate minus death rate is equal to growth rate. I just faced some technicality. So when this difference becomes zero, we mean that the population has been stabilized. What do we mean? So the population has reached the replacement level. We'll discuss about the replacement level later, but then here our population reaches the level of replacement or the replacement level. Replacement level. Okay, we move forward and we understand that we have some examples as well. Okay, so there was a time when negative growth rate took place in some countries like Japan, Russia, Italy, and Eastern Europe. So here, what actually happened was the fertility level was more than the replacement level. Okay. Okay. Now let's understand the fertility rate. Fertility rate is basically, get back to my, yeah. Fertility rate is basically number of live births per thousand women in the childbearing age group of 15 to 49 years of age. Okay. This is number of child birth per thousand women in childbearing age group. Okay, crude rate is the rough age for entire population. It is given in your NCRT, so just remember that crude rate means rough average for the entire population. Now let's talk about the infant mortality rate. The infant mortality rate. Okay. Infant mortality rate is number of death of babies before the age of 1 year per thousand live births. Number of death of babies who are less than 1 year per thousand live births. Then it is maternal mortality rate. This has gone quite low, less in this particular period of time due to multiple reasons. However, just look at the definition. It is number of women who die while giving birth. Okay, per 1 lakh live births. Women who die while giving birth. Then you have sex ratio. Sex ratio is a very important concept and can come in MCQ. Sex ratio is basically number of females per thousand males in a given area at a specific period of time. Number of females per thousand males. Okay. Age structure of population. Let's understand the age structure of population. So, age structure of population means proportions of person in different age group relative to the total population. Age structure of population means proportion of persons in different age groups relative to the total population. Okay. Changes this particular age structure of population actually changes with uh, development and average life expectancy. If the entire area is affected with poor medical facility, then diseases will be spreading, and then ultimately it would lead to shorter lifespan of the people living there. However, if everyone has improved quality of life, we will notice that there is a small population of younger age group and large population of the older age group, because then the older people will tend to live more. Okay, I mean, the birth rate might be at the same level. However, the older people who used to die earlier because of uh, poor health facilities, now with improved quality of life, they might live longer. Okay, so all of this changes due to this particular change that I mentioned just right now, that small population of young people, small population, and older people, large population. This particular condition will be changing due to aging of population. Quite a simple process, because of course these young people, when they grow, that means aging of population happens. So yes. Now, dependency ratio. Dependency ratio is proportion of dependents. Who are dependents? Elderly people and the children with the working age group of 15 to 64 years. Dependency ratio. Dependents, elderly people with working age population, that is of 15 to 64 years. All right. Then you have a just discuss that what if this dependency ratio keeps on rising? It's actually a cause of worry for in multiple countries because firstly, since your population is facing an aging of population, it will become difficult for a relatively smaller population of working age to carry the burden of providing for a relatively large proportion of dependents. Ultimately, these dependents have to be taken care by the working age population only. So, if this dependency ratio keeps on rising, if we have more and more dependents in a particular economy, then working age population has to take care of them, and the burden on them will keep on rising. Okay. And on the other hand, if the dependency ratio falls, if we have a falling dependency ratio, this can be as a source of economic growth and prosperity because we will be having larger proportions of workers relative to non-workers. And this is referred to as the demographic dividend. What is it? Demographic dividend is when falling what? Dependency ratio will ultimately lead to less of dependence and more of working age population. We discussed earlier about the replacement level when we were talking about growth rate. So replacement level is what? When the difference of birth rate and death rate is zero, or in practice which is very small, then we say that the population has become stabilized or has reached the replacement level. This means that the rate of growth, replacement level, is ultimately rate of growth the rate of growth is required, that is required for new generations to replace the older ones. Okay, this is replacement level. It will die out when this BR minus DR is equal to 0. Then the replacement level dies out. Okay, this is here what happens. The population becomes quite stabilized. Okay, then you have life expectancy. Life expectancy means the estimated average number of years that a person is expected to survive or live. Then you have sonogram. Sonogram is basically an X-ray like diagnostic device based on the ultrasound technology, and it is sometimes misused to determine the sex of the unborn child in the mother's womb. Okay, let's move forward and talk about family. Okay. It's a very important concept, first of all, and it's if you think that the famine is due to fall in food and grain production, then you're completely, not completely, but then you're partially wrong. Because famine is not due to fall in food grain production. It is a situation of excess prices to access the adequate food and are caused by high level of continuing poverty and malnutrition in an agroclimatic environment that is being affected by variations in the rainfall. Fine. This famine is a major source of increased mortality. What is famine? Basically, it's a situation of crisis to access the adequate food and are caused by high level of continuing poverty and malnutrition in an agroclimatic environment. That is basically affected by, of course, the variations in the rainfall. So it may be due to lack of adequate means of transportation as well and communication as well. Also, the inadequate efforts on the part of the state. And also may be caused by the failure of entitlement, which is inability of people to buy or obtain food. We will discuss this failure of entitlement a little later. Now let's focus on, or rather, I'll just explain it to you here only. Failure of entitlement, if we are talking about not so typical concept, entitlement means inability to obtain or buy the food. Fine. Then you have the age structure of Indian population. So majority of the population of India is in young Kerala. is the beginning to require acquire an age structure like that of the developed countries. So, understand this. In Kerala, the majority of the population is more or less beginning to acquire an age structure like that of those which are of developed countries, and our India is currently a developing nation. Uttar Pradesh, on the other hand, has high proportions in the younger age group and relatively lower proportion among the aged. So here, demographic dividend, we come back to this concept of, where did we study that? Demographic dividend. And for this, hmm, after this, let me find it out. Yeah, it's here. So we studied about this concept over here, demographic dividend. This means we were discussing it in the context of dependency ratio. When falling dependency ratio happens, which means less dependents are there then and large working population is there. So demographic dividend, when the number of working people is more than the number of dependent people, then there is more growth. It means dependency ratio falls, and this is called demographic dividend. So we were talking about the age structure of the Indian population, and majority of Indian population. Let's talk about Kerala first. So Kerala, the age structure is like that of the developed countries. What maybe working age population is high and the dependents are low. Uttar Pradesh has younger age groups, higher younger age groups, and relatively low proportions among the aged people. Okay. UP has what? It has high young people and low old people. Less old people, no old people. That. Now let's talk about sex ratio. India has had a declining sex ratio, and for the specific reasons being sex-specific abortion, okay, female infanticide, child marriage. Earlier, it was also the case of maternal mortality because females, because of lack of proper health facilities, they used to die while giving birth. However, in the current scenario, this maternal mortality rate has more or less reduced in number. Okay. Now, this particular less or declining sex ratio that occurs in our country is also due to lack of nutritious food that is being provided to the women out there or the girl children out there, girl child out there. And we also have social myths in our society. So sex ratio is also different in many parts of the country as well. In Kerala, it is the highest, and then it is in Punjab, Haryana, Chandigarh, where it is quite low. It's the lowest there. Okay, the several factors responsible for the decline in the child sex ratio includes firstly the severe neglect of girl babies in infancy. This leads to leading death rates. Then you have sex-specific abortions. Kinds of people may find the gender of the baby, and if they get to know that it's a girl child, they may prevent the girl baby from being born. So this is again sex-specific abortions. And of course, you have female infanticide, that is killing of the girl babies due to some sort of religious or cultural beliefs or what nonsense or superstitious beliefs that people hold in the society. We also have an act for this thing, prenatal diagnostic techniques, that is Regulation and Prevention of Misuse Act. In 1996, it was actually implemented and has been strengthened in the 2003. Now, there are regional variations as well of low child sex ratio in India. The regional pattern of low child sex ratios in India is that the lowest child sex ratios are found in the most prosperous regions of India. Understand this. At times, people may not do selective abortions due to poverty or ignorance or lack of resources. In fact, economically prosperous families decide to have fewer children, which is good. Okay, you're controlling the growth of population. However, it's essential for you. to give adequate amount of resources to both the genders, or uh, you should not be gender specific. However, these economically prosperous families may choose to choose the sex of the child, and therefore they tend to find out if the unborn baby, is a female or a male. And if it's a female, they tend to move towards sex specific abortions. Let's talk about mass density. Mass density means the number of individuals, such as inhabitants or housing units, per unit of area. Due to increase in population, mass density is also rising in our country. Failure of entitlements, I already explained it to you. Amartya Sen, we did, yeah, failure of entitlements here. Amartya Sen and others have shown that famines were not really caused due to what? Fall in the food grain production. They were also caused by failure of entitlement, or the inability of people to obtain or buy food. Fine. The National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, that is NREGA. Oh, this is the latest state initiative to tackle the problem of hunger and starvation in the rural areas. Then you have role of literacy in population growth. So see, literacy is a prerequisite to education, and it is an instrument of empowerment. The more literate the population becomes, the greater the consciousness of career options uh, start to happen in our country, and then the participation in the knowledge economy. Literacy can also lead to health awareness and fuller participation in the cultural and economical well-being of the community. Literacy varies considerably across gender, across regions and social groups, especially in our country, because of multiple forms of discrimination. Literacy rates also vary by social group. So if you look back at the history, historically disadvantaged communities like the scheduled castes and the scheduled tribes have lower rates of literacy, and rates of female literacy within this group is even lower. Fine. Because they have been subjected to different forms of discrimination since the historical times. Regional variations are also very wide in our country, with states like Kerala, which are approaching universal literacy, but then we also have states like Bihar, which are lagging far behind. If we talk about epidemics, epidemics has been controlled due to mass vaccination, better sanitation. However, there are diseases like malaria, TB, diarrhea, dysentery, which kill people even today. So the birth rate is slow to change due to social cultural phenomena as well. And the low total fertility state are Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Himachal Pradesh, West Bengal, Karnataka, Maharashtra, and high total fertility rates are states are Madhya Pradesh, Bihar, Rajasthan, and Uttar Pradesh. Rural urban differences also exist with respect to the vast majority of population. Fine. So we have mass media and communication channels at present time. So these are gradually bringing in the images of urban lifestyles and patterns of consumption into the rural villages. And this is bridging the gap between the rural and the urban. So therefore, people living in the rural areas might have adapted quite a number of things or lifestyle that the urban people usually follow. Then the rapid growth in urbanization. Towns or cities have been attracting the rural population. Those who cannot really find work or sufficient work in rural areas, and I'm not mentioning about disguised unemployment, because then there's no point, right? If you want to actually earn and have sufficient work, you may not be able to find it in rural areas. So therefore, people go to cities in search of work. This flow of continuous rural to urban migration has also been accelerated by the continuous decline of common property resources like the pond, the forest, and the grazing land. Okay. Also, essentially important that people living in villages mostly no longer work in the agricultural sector, but they are engaged in non-farm rural occupations. Okay. Now, these resources, the resources that I told you, which were more or less earlier public property, have been quite less in number these days, have been turned into private property or they are exhausted. Okay, ponds may run or dry or no longer provide enough fish. Forests may have been cut down and have vanished. People no longer have access to these resources, but on the other hand, they also have to buy many things in the market that they used to get for free earlier. The opportunities for earning income are limited in the villages. The city may also be preferred for social reasons, especially the relative anonymity that it offers. Fine. Why am I saying so? Because the fact that urban life involves interaction with strangers can be an advantage for different reasons. For the socially oppressed groups who live in villages or backward community, backward rural areas, like the scheduled castes and the scheduled tribes, this may offer them some sort of partial protection from the daily humiliation that they may have to face. They may suffer in villages where everyone knows their caste identity and would down upon them. But the anonymity of the city would also allow the poorer sections of society to socially dominant rural groups to engage in low status work that they would not be able to do in the village. So all these reasons are what makes a city attractive destination for the villagers. Now let's talk about the National Family Planning Program. It has now been renamed as the National Family Welfare Program. This was given in 1952 and has been renamed after the emergency. Okay, so this, let me write it. National Family Planning Program. Now, this program was introduced with the objective of slowing down the rate and pattern of population growth through birth control methods and improve public health standards. Okay, but there were some coercive methods also introduced during the emergency period, which was from 1975 to 1976, like mass sterilization, that was forceful male vasectomy and female tubectomy, and it was also criticized later because it was not really a practice that was considered to be quite essential for family planning. Okay, they could have used some of the methods as well, but it's okay. So, with the coming of new governments, the program was then renamed as the National Family Welfare Program with new set of guidance to achieve the objectives. Success and failures of the planning program. So if we talk about the success, the growth rate of population has decreased. People have started appreciating small family norms. The infant mortality rate and the maternal mortality rate has been brought down, and life expectancy has also increased. We have achieved nearly universal awareness of the need for and methods of family planning. However, there are failures as well. The growth rate still continues to be high as compared to developed nations because ours is still a developing nation. Okay, and then the coercive family planning program has been obviously opposed by people like the vasectomy for women and tubectomy for women. Mostly poor and powerless people were the victims of this particular program. And then lack of availability of reliable family planning method. Okay, just one concept that I have to tell you now, that is um, population momentum. Population momentum basically refers to a situation where large cohort of women of reproductive age will fuel population growth over next generation, even if each woman has fewer kids than the previous generations did. Okay. One more point. And now in 2017, the government of India came out with the National Health Policy 2017, in which most of the social demographic goals of National Population Policy 2000 was incorporated with the newer targets. And then, of course, you have to memorize the statistics of the 15th census of India, that is 2011. Sex ratio was 943 to 1000. This is the sex ratio. And then you have most populated state, Uttar Pradesh, least populated region, Sikkim state with maximum mortality rate, Uttar Pradesh minimum, Kerala maximum infant mortality rate, Madhya Pradesh minimum infant mortality rate, Manipur. Literacy, male literacy about 80.9%. And then you have the female literacy, which is on female literacy is on 64.6%. Largest state in area wise is Rajasthan. Smallest state in area wise is Goa, not Gujarat. Okay. So that's all for demographic structure of Indian society, and we might begin the next chapter in the next video. Thank you.